Hi, welcome to CSA Bangalore chapter Cyber.AI Insights and Power of Knowing Forums, Knowledge Nexus, tech that drives you, ideas that scale you. And we are going to discuss on the topic today is crypto agility, navigating quantum shifts in cybersecurity. Your go-to podcast on how crypto and quantum tech are shaping cybersecurity. And today we'll explore crypto and quantum technologies. A special welcome to all who have tuned into Power of Knowing Forum and CSA Bangalore Chapter A Cyber AI Sites, uh, episode 238 on LinkedIn Live. We are honored to have Mr. Ganesh Gopalan, Vice President and General Manager, Identity Security for PKI and CLMBU joining us today. Let's welcome our esteemed speaker to our podcast event and let's dive into the topic. Hi Ganesh, welcome to our
Hi,
podcast. How are you
hi,
day?
Prem.
How are you today, sir?
I'm good, Prem. Doing good. How are you?
Good, Ganesh. A small intro about yourself, Ganesh, before we dive into the topic to the audience.
Absolutely, Prem. So I've been into the cybersecurity industry for now 24 years. So I started career as a fresher and engineer, starting with the research and development, and gone through a long way, like building multiple products around the security space. And now I'm part of HappyWix, taking care of the CLM and PKI and code signing business in terms of product management and engineering. So more into the IAM space and
Mhm.
core working on the strategic decision, seeing what are the new market drivers that's coming in. So the cybersecurity is a very dynamic by itself in nature. There are so many threats and so many vulnerabilities and so many updates that are happening in the market. So keeping up to the space, and also this is completely something which is a standard driven industry, right? Like it has to be a compliant and governance is something. So taking care of those aspects. So that's small intro about me, Prem. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ganesh. Let's dive into the topic and say now crypto agility and quantum has been the buzzwords which are happening for the last quite some
Right.
years. I think last 2 3 years we see quantum and crypto being talking more. In that context, what does crypto agility really mean, and why it is becoming a top priority in cybersecurity field?
Right. Yeah, it's a great question, Prem. So crypto agility is like what exactly it boils down to is like any organizations, right? Like they should be always prepared where they will be able to switch between various cryptographic algorithms or protocols or libraries without disrupting any operations. Why it is crucial, right? Like sometimes many new event that happens in the industry, many threats that comes in, many vulnerabilities that gets popped up in an industry. So industries like as organization should be much prepared for them to move from one algorithm to another algorithm or one key size to another key size, one hashing algorithm to another hashing algorithm. They should have a mechanisms where they will be able to go in switch between one algorithm to another algorithm. That is what typically we refer to as a crypto agility. Right.
Thank you, Ganesh, on that. Now, coming to the second point that I would like to ask is
Mhm.
what or how does crypto agility differ from traditional cryptographic lifecycle management? Because we are talking crypto in all forms, and we
Right.
want to see how the traditional lifecycle management versus agility in differ. So,
Right.
your point.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like, see, cryptographic or cryptographic lifecycle management is basically, that any keys or certificates or your passwords, everything has its own expiry time. Basically, it depends upon various policies and organization used to set up. So I can always say, like, take a bank as an example, right? Like they say your password should be rotated every 90 days. Now, what happens is like end of 90th day, you will be prompted that you go and please change your password. You go and give a new password, and there are certain policies that you set it up and then move toward the new password. Same way in any cryptographic lifecycle management, you might be using an API key, you might be using a secret, you might be using an SSH key. You use different identities or different keys for different authentication purposes. And all that is governed by different expiry time, and that completely helps in moving from like one value to another value. That is a traditional cryptographic lifecycle management. But what is crypto agility? How does it differ from a typical traditional cryptographic lifecycle management? Is like this is actually adding a proactive layer where an organization can have a rapid reconfiguration or replacement of algorithm in response to a new threat or a policy shifts. It is more about flexibility and future readiness rather than setting up an infrastructure like where the or users are not forced to change the password very regularly. But this is like how the governance or how you can bring in some kind of a reconfiguration for an organization that they should be able to do a single click replacement of the algorithm from one algorithm to another algorithm, one protocol to another algorithm. You would have heard in many situations, hey, TLS 1.1 was used long time back. TLS 1.2 is still in use, but now people say that like TLS 1.3 is the protocol version that you should be using in a handshake, right? This kind of a switch we need and layer which is called as a crypto agility.
No, can we see when we talk about TLS 3.0 and other pointers that are becoming critical? Can we look at a real time example where a lack of crypto agility caused serious consequences with
Yeah.
your experience, Ganesh?
Yeah, there have been multiple incidents, Prem. Maybe I can point out a couple of incidents, right? Like I think to put it very easily, like I think all of us know in the industry is like we shifting from SHA-1 to SHA-256.
Yeah.
This is something which we have been seen in our lifetime of cybersecurity space and using in many e-commerce portal or online or application portal, right? Like SHA-1 to SHA-256.
Hmm.
SHA-1 was pointed as a vulnerable algorithm around 2007, but till 2019, there had been certificates floating around with the SHA-1 algorithm. But apparently, what happened is like in 2017, all the browsers, like saying like Google, Microsoft, Mozilla, everybody came and say that like we are not going to encourage any certificate with the SHA-1 as an algorithm, which is being used in the handshake. Now, what happened is like this put in a lot of stress to many organizations who were still running legacy application with a SHA-1 based certificate. So, since the browser stopped working, their certificate was not acceptable by these browsers. Their online portals cannot be accessed by any end user. Now, that becomes a clear outage to the organization, and they have to go and look for alternate solution in a very quick succession of time. And they have to switch to SHA-256 with a new hardware, new software, everything. In that condition, what happens is like typically when you have a planned migration, you might be thinking in a very fashioned way. You can move the system from one layer to another layer, one algorithm to another layer. But when there is an enforcement happening, when there is some kind of a governance coming to a picture and a browser is stopping using, right, what happens is like it becomes very critical for the organization. So this is what we say that crypto agility is one of the important piece any organization should be looking for, so that they are prepared as and when these kind of threats or these kind of compliance or these kind of regulations comes in, they can also adopt in a very regular fashion manner rather than having an outage happening just because something is enforced on day 0 or day 1 after this governance or the compliance has been published. This is one such example of like SHA-1 to SHA-2. And I think many of it have also heard of. Sorry, I think I lost. There is something called as a ROCA vulnerability. So what is this ROCA vulnerability? Is like sometime back it was formed as like RSA. They have found lot of weak keys. What do you mean by a weak key, right? Like RSA, to be more secure, the key has to be very secure. So the key has to be generated with lot of randomness. It has lot of properties, everything. But they found a particular TPM module was generating RSA keys in a very weak format. Now, when you say a weak format, what does it mean? That means that anybody can go and break your RSA key without having a corresponding private key or anything. So in that context, they came in with a recommendation saying that any organizations are using this particular TPM module should go and replace their RSA V key to a higher key format. Now, what happens is like this becomes something called as a bulk operation, because this is not may not be one system or two system or one application or two application. It can be hundreds and thousands in an organization. How can they carry out that level of bulk operations in a given point of time? So for that, you require some applications like which can handle something around the crypto agility and can do a crypto movement from bulk operation. So you need some kind of a platform which can help you out. So that is why we keep telling that, saying like crypto agility is something which is required for many organization, setting up from the experience of for various threats, not necessarily that it has to be a cryptographic algorithm. It can be even a key. It can be even a compromise of a CA. Just assume that we all heard about something that happened recently. It's like Entrust distrust. So basically, they said like Google distrusted all the certificate issued out of Entrust for various reasons. So suddenly, one fine morning, there can be an enforcement saying like the certificate issued by Entrust will not be trusted by my browsers. So now, what happens to those organizations which are using that particular certificate issued out of that various reasons within the cybersecurity space? We need a platform which can be very helping you to move towards an agile platform.
I completely agree. Where there are a lot of things coming up to ensure migration, and that
Right.
that is going to be a big shift. Now, coming to that pointer, how does the emergence of quantum computing challenge today's cryptography standards? Because again, we'll have to look at compliance also, right? Or the standards are being followed or not. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, did you hear what I was asking?
Yeah, I just lost it, Prince.
Yeah, so we wanted to understand with the emerging of quantum computing challenge, today's
Yeah.
cryptography on how cryptography standards are maintained. How does that work? Is what I wanted to understand.
Yes, that. So I think all of us, as you mentioned in the starting of this podcast session, right? I think you mentioned about like quantum computing. I think you introduced that term. So I think all of us know that the quantum computers, which is completely based on different principles, it's coming real, right? Like it is based on quantum physics, and it is no more like a bits, like where you all know that zeros and ones is what we all have used to all through these years, right? Like we all know binary representation 0 and 1, but now it is moving towards a qubit. So what exactly qubit is like? Basically, any particular state you can have 0 and 1 in a given point of time. So what does that mean is like the number of operations that you can do with the quantum computers becomes very large. Any operation that can you can do with a very traditional crypto system, traditional computers, right? Like with the quantum computers you can do that job in a much faster scenarios. So in that context, what happened is like when this quantum computers become real, and there are certain algorithms being found how we can break a traditional crypto algorithm like an RSA or an ACC kind of an algorithm. So there is some algorithm called as a Shor's algorithm, which we typically represent one of the algorithm that you can use to break a RSA or ACC algorithm. But with a normal RSA, ECC with a Shor's algorithm with the traditional computers, they say for a given key size, it is going to take billion years for anybody to break that particular operation with the Shor's algorithm. But now what they say is like when the quantum computers comes in, and with the number of qubits getting developed, with the number of qubits that can increase from 1 qubit to 2 qubit to a 4,000 qubit, they say that like for an RSA or a ECC key, you should be able to decrypt any encrypted data without your private key in hours. So now it is reducing that years, billion years into hours. That is the real threat what these quantum computers are bringing into the system. And today, all of us into this world of e-commerce and HTTPS, we all know that underlying protocol. It is basically based out of the RSA or ECC. Now, what happens is just assume that one fine morning you get up and then you see that the number of qubits available to break a RSA algorithm is able to break it without your private key. That means every system in the internet, it can be broken without a private key. It is like this: you're just assume that you are getting into a city and you will be able to get into any house without a key into that house. So that is the kind of an experience that you will get in the internet world. You will be able to get into anybody's system, anybody's portal without even you having a private key. So you will be able to decrypt anything that is in the online portal. That is the kind of a threat what these quantum computers bring in for this real cryptographic standards or a traditional cryptographic standards what we are currently using. Okay, the question is like, are we really worried about today? Is it real today? Not really. But the problem is like, they also call something called as an harvest now and decrypt later kind of a challenges. What do you mean by that? See, I can start accumulating all your encrypted data in the channel, and once the quantum computers become real for me to break that particular key size, I can just go and decrypt all the data. So it is basically a passive attack at this point of time. I try to accumulate all this information, but I can decrypt at a later point of time once it becomes real. And in many organizations, the data aging is also very important because working with a lot of compliance and standard bodies, you take a banking industry or a finance sector, they have a lot of audit requirements saying like any data has to be retained for 7 years. So in all these cases, what happens is like any data that got exchanged in the next 2 3 years, if somebody is able to decrypt, that means there is a plain data that is going to be lying in the internet world without even they are not the actual recipient of that particular data. They are not the person who should be looking into that particular data. Like that's why actually this brings in a lot of challenges, and our traditional cryptographic protocols like RSA, ECC can be broken.
Okay. Uh, with that, I think what we see is more of algorithms that are going to be looked at, right? So,
Right. Yeah.
what are the key cryptographic algorithms that are considered quantum vulnerable?
Absolutely. I think from the asymmetric cryptography perspective, particularly like where the certificates are used, like in that world, RSA and ECC certificates are highly vulnerable to quantum attacks, right? And is a symmetric algorithm vulnerable? Yes, definitely. There are a lot of underlying like low level, like I will say, like older symmetric algorithms, like that can definitely be an vulnerable algorithm. Definitely, they are vulnerable algorithm, and particularly the algorithm from AES standpoint, like which is a symmetric algorithm. I think most of us currently uses like AES. They say that like AES 256 is actually it is definitely quantum resistant, so it cannot be broken. So for many organizations who they are using still a key size of lesser key sizes, they may have to move for a higher key size. And wherever they are using a different type of a key algorithm, they may have to upgrade to a AES kind of an algorithm.
Okay. Now, with that key thing, what should organizations begin when building a crypto agility roadmap? Do you see a roadmap to be placed where they should start looking at it, or what is your take on it, Ganesh?
Absolutely. See, I think today in any organization, I think, right, where all you are using a cryptographic algorithm, it is a blind spot.
Hmm.
Because these cryptographic algorithms, knowingly or unknowingly, we might be using in multiple places. See, it can be even in your code, it can be in a configuration file, it can be in a dependency file, it can be in your containers, or it can be in a certificate, or it can be in many other places. So today for an organization, considering a whole lot of infrastructure components what we use, we know there are so many devices that we use in an organization today. There are so many IoT devices, so many connected devices. Every such places can have one form of the other form of a cryptographic algorithms being used. Now, bringing a clear visibility of all these cryptographic asset itself is a bigger challenge. So, because we don't have one standard mechanisms today for us to bring all the cryptographic asset into a centralized platform. So that is the first touch point when we start about a journey building for us to build a crypto agility roadmap for any organization. That is the first touch point. The second touch point is like, okay, now I have all the assets. How do I classify them? How do I understand the sensitivity? How do I classify that exposure levels? So we may have to do a lot of prioritization on this crypto asset. See, all the crypto assets may not be vulnerable immediately. So it is like this. I can take an example. When we are going out of our house, right? Like typically we lock outside door and go. So that is how we do. But whether we are locking our internal bedrooms or other living rooms, it's a secondary problem statement. But my primary problem statement is like the door outside my house. Like that, we may have to prioritize a lot of things within an organization also. What is a vulnerable components for which I have to give immediate attention. So, because you can't go and solve every problem with one solution. So you may have to have a different approach for a different problem statement. So the prioritization has to become the secondary touch point after you try to bring the complete visibility of all your cryptographic assets. So once you are done the prioritization, the third important thing is like how are we going to work very closely with the remediation operation. So what kind of a remediation I have to build in? What kind of an automation platform that we have to build in so that this can set up an auto remediation for any organization. So for us to see a PQC from going for a quantum migration, right? Like moving from a classical cryptographic algorithm to a post-quantum cryptographic algorithm, the stages will be like you do an inventory or a visibility, then you do a prioritization, and then you go build an automation by setting up a remediation operation. So this is a kind of a path or a roadmap for any organization they should be setting up.
No, I think pointers are very clear that the roadmap has to be clear in crystal way to look at growing into a business. Now, when we look at a roadmap, eventually the costs will come in, then the
Absolutely.
performances will come in, and the agility will be. How do we balance the crypto agility with performance, costs, and business agility? Is the pointer that I would need your inputs on, Ganesh.
Yeah, great. This is a great question. I think for many organizations, for many entities, for all of us, I think, right, like, the most important problem is the cost. So, though every organization works based on some budgeting, and they should start planning for a very clear budgeting for their security, business model, and so
And
many engineering
to
operations.
add one pointer here is every organization takes cybersecurity as a cost center, right? Rather than
Yes,
looking at this one. So the costs become very, very important. That's the roadmap that we want to understand when it comes to
yes.
crypto agility. Yeah.
Yeah. See, actually, this is going to pose us a little trickier situation also, Prem, because this talking about when you talk about quantum computing and post quantum cryptography, like all of us have to understand one important touch point is like this is not a drop in replacement algorithm
Yeah.
like a SHA-1 to SHA-256. See, for SHA-1 to SHA-256, when we moved, it was just a drop in replacement of your algorithm. I
Mm.
was able to continue my operation with the same infrastructure. I was able to run with the same system what we had, the same RAM, same memory, like same hard disk or the same capacity, whatever it is. Like I don't have to go through a bigger change in terms of an infrastructure cost because when we say from SHA-1 to SHA-256, the size of the algorithm itself, right, it moved from 20 bytes to 32 bytes. So it
Mm.
increased only by 12 bytes. But when you look from the post-quantum cryptography, we all have to understand the mechanisms behind, the mathematics behind is itself, behind the post-quantum itself is very different. So that means even your hardware has to go through an upgrade. Your bandwidth has to go through an upgrade. Your storage has to go through an upgrade. Your software and application has to go through an upgrade. So this becomes a huge investment cost for any organization, not necessarily that you just change from one small algorithm to another algorithm. So
Yeah.
that is why the cost factor is very, very important things that we have to understand. Like, so we have to understand what is the kind of a trade-offs that we may have to do with the hardware and the software abstraction layers, and what are the various policy engines that we may have to bring in. And then we also have to prioritize based on my crown jewel applications, right? Like, what are my primary applications that I want to move immediately? Like, so we have to do, as I mentioned in my the previous point, like more on the prioritization aspect. I think organization also have to spend lot of understanding around like what is my trade-off now. See, today I can take an example like if you are doing an 100 RSA operations per second. Now when I go towards a post-quantum cryptography, how many post-quantum algorithm operations I can do per second? Is it 110? Is it 120th? It is 100th? You don't know. There are going to be lot of understanding what we require for us to even understand, and accordingly my hardware capacity has to increase. Now if I'm using a 4 GB RAM, now just assume that my operations are going to be reduced by 110. Should I increase to 40 GB to achieve the same number of operations? So these kind of recommendations and understanding is like what an organization has to bring in, and then they have to understand their risk and then obviously ROI has to be calculated by for an organization, and then go towards set up a post quantum journey for themselves.
Very important point. First, we spoke about looking at performance and cost and business agility. Then we spoke about how is the roadmap. First is the roadmap that we put. Then we spoke
Yeah,
about costs and stuff. Now,
yeah,
with costs, we are also looking at a lot of changes to the infrastructure that is underlying that to be changed as well. Now, again, with this, you need to look at even the compliance side of it.
yeah.
What role does policy and framework compliance mandate play in pushing crypto agility?
Yeah. See, I think typically in the cybersecurity space, like as there are more evolving over the threat and new algorithms comes in, I think compliance also, all the standard bodies also picks up it up immediately and then started mandating that for any organization with a given time frame. Like they say, like by June 2026, you should have all this prioritized. June 2028, you should be starting with this particular algorithm. So there is a very clear mandate set by these kind of standard bodies, right? They come and bring in this lot of governance, right? Like, and then many times all these government also picks it up, then the financial institution bodies also picks it up. There are multiple entities who plays a very role. So now for us all to understand, I think sorry, I think there's a
There
connectivity
was a
issue.
glitch there. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
so
go ahead.
particularly as in algorithm, right? Like, so NIST is one of such regulatory bodies like who standardize these cryptographic algorithms, particularly on the post-quantum world. And there are also a lot of other bodies, and there are a lot of analysts who's playing a very important role and working very closely and giving a lot of guidance, right? Like for the industry, how they should start preparing for their compliance mandate and how they should be prepared based upon the data aging, and with so many other recommendations like many ETSI standards, IOSI standards, and we are also expecting that a lot more like RFCs and standards which are being published around the crypto space or the PKI space. All those standard bodies also come with their updated recommendations so that we can move towards a newer algorithm. So yeah, as we started to just put together, one is the problem statement, the second one is like these algorithms and why it is vulnerable, and then comes with the cost factor, and the last one is the compliance. I think now when all these things put together, we come into some kind of an line to understand like when we have to go and start about really talking about this, and is it even real, right?
I think with three pillars are first the roadmap, then the cost, business agility. Now we have framework and compliance. Now,
Mhm.
what we should look at or rethink is the product side, right? And
Mhm.
what should the product security teams rethink their architecture in light of quantum risks? So, how do they look at their architecture to be made quantum or crypto agility side?
Yeah, Prem. Yeah, Prem. I think this is where, like, I think we are very important things comes for an organization. Like, it has to be really an policy-driven configuration. So when I say a policy-driven configuration, like, okay, are we going to have a mandate saying like after May 1st, 2026, all my algorithms are going to be only post-quantum? Is it even really possible? Is it something which we can really mandate? Because when we talk about post quantum, right, like we also have to understand there are so many applications and devices and protocol that we may be using in an organization. Is it possible that everything gets updated in one fine morning? It's not. There is going to be a journey. There is going to be a transition period. So basically, what we recommend from like APX standpoint, like we recommend saying like we should start thinking about some kind of a hybrid recommendation. So, what do you mean by a hybrid? Yeah, instead of having a clear cutoff saying like from traditional crypto we move towards the post quantum, we should have a hybrid model. So we should have a place where both these algorithms are in place for some time. Slowly any algorithms or any devices or any application that can understand post quantum, they should be able to operate with the post quantum. And if any application cannot understand, then they should have a fallback to a traditional crypto algorithm, and then the business should continue. So in that way, what will happen is like instead of having stopped a business model. They will continue to do the business, but at the same time, they having a very transition journey, very smooth from a traditional crypto to a post quantum. So this is the kind of an approach for any product team they should be looking, or the security team should be looking when they think about their modernizing their cryptographic components, right? Like to move towards the post quantum journey.
With that, I would like to go to the next pointer. Is now four pointers have been addressed and how the team has to look at. Now, when it comes to execution, what is that we should look at, right? And what's the timeline we are realistically looking for a quantum threats to become practical?
Mhm. Right. See, though we see, is it quantum computers real with we breaking a traditional classical algorithms today? Actually, maybe no. Answer maybe no. But when it is going to be real, is it 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? Yes, we might think, oh, I can even take 15 years. But the problem now is like this 15 years is not anymore real, because the speed with which the quantum computers are really growing and the qubits can be formed very quickly, it looks like these things can become real in next couple of years. So can always a security be an afterthought process? Absolutely no. We have to be proactive. We should have a mechanisms, everything, policies driven now itself for any organization. And for any organization also, setting up a policy and enforcing the policy, it is not that can happen in overnight, or it not a monthly. It is going to be years. Sometimes it can go for a couple of years also. It can take 2 to 4 years for any organization to pick up a new security standard. So in that context, if you talk about the timeline and the realistic timeline, actually, I will say, is it as of today, or to be put it very other way, I will say as of yesterday. So that is the kind of a timeline that we are looking in, considering, as I talked about, one important problem statement saying like harvest now and decrypt later, right? Where we can start harvesting all the encrypted data, and we can definitely decrypt it at any later point of time when the quantum computers with these qubits become real. Then all the data that has been exchanged in an encrypted channel, data in transit, or sometimes it can be in a data at rest, everything can get exposed in one fine morning without even having a private key. So to that context, right, like maybe to stress again, the timeline is definitely immediate. And based on that, like we also see that like a lot of cybersecurity frameworks, basically like a NIST cybersecurity framework or CNSA 2.0, there are a lot of Australian government recommendation. There are so many federal bodies also coming in a recommendation saying that like all organizations to start looking towards a post quantum journey immediately, and they state a mandate based on a data aging. They say that like any data you're not bothered, it can be decrypted also, you don't lose it, don't worry about it. Any data that you want to retain up to 2028, they say that okay, increase your key size. But any data that you want to use it after 2030, then start looking for a post quantum migration as of today. So this is a kind of an recommendations being given by the bodies, and based on these recommendations we may have to move towards the next step, and then we may have to set up a timeline for based on the organization and priorities, right? Like, that has to become. But definitely, I would say for every organization, post quantum cryptography becomes a mandatory thing. We should start looking for that journey as of today. Whether everything should move towards post quantum tomorrow, not necessary. But we need that visibility. We need a migration plan. We have to set up a journey and accordingly help our customers or help the organizations to move towards the migration part.
Now, going on the technical side, now we put everything on the strategic side that we want to look at,
Mhm.
and we want to look at the technical issues. What are some emerging post quantum cryptographic algorithms that look very promising in the industry today?
Absolutely. I think so. I think for many people who have been following quantum computers and post quantum cryptography, I think certain names, what I can repeat, like Kyber. Yeah, sorry, there's a glitch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was talking about like certain algorithms like Dilithium, Kyber, Falcon, Sphinx, right? Like these are all some names like which was in the initial draft period of these algorithms. So it was shortlisted by the NIST a couple of years back, and we went through so many processes around that to validate whether those algorithms are real and it cannot be broken, and whether that is a recommended algorithm that can be published. Based on that, NIST published three algorithms in the last August 2024 and published them in the name of like FIPS 203, FIPS 204, and FIPS 205 as the standard names, replacing the Kyber and Dilithium and Sphinx Plus as a three different algorithm. Falcon is one such algorithm. It is still been not yet finalized, but definitely been one of the finalized candidate. And there are also new algorithms. They are also trying to get into the draft state, and then they try to finalize. So these are all the new algorithms that actually is promising and it is real. And in that context, I think many applications, many browsers already have started supporting these algorithms so that like they can set up an initial understanding how these protocols are going to work in any applications context.
Now, when we talk about cryptography, and most of the time it is certificates that are more important,
Mhm.
right? How does the or how does or what role would certificate life cycle automation play in achieving crypto agility? That is the next pointer, because now we are at the SSL and the other certifications that
Mhm.
are needed to do an activity to make it secure, right? So in your understanding, what could be that as a life cycle automation part for
Yeah.
certificate management?
I think that's my side of recommendation, right? Like brains, it's more important thing is like we should be providing a lot of abstraction layers. I think we should bring in a lot of abstraction layers, understanding what is a cryptographic service provider, who's like managing a key management platforms, how do we enforce a policy decision, and we also should have a lot of pluggable crypto backends, right? Like these kind of an abstraction layer, bringing in an abstraction layer, right? This should be an architectural pattern. So in this context, what happens is like we will be able to do a lot of plug and play replacement of these particular frameworks or abstraction layer, and we can bring in a change from one algorithm to another algorithm or one protocol to another algorithm. It becomes easier. And another important recommendation that would also provide is like we should start avoiding hard coding the algorithms or keys in the code. It should never get hard coded within a program. It should be a configurable element, right? In that context, what happens is like we will be able to move towards when it is a configuration element. And if I'm using a crypto backend as a separate component, my application need not go through a chain. My application should be able to feed in a configurable information, and it should be able to feed in this configurable data into another crypto backend and get my crypto operation. So in that way, what happens is my architecturally my applications are not dependent or not hard coding within an application. So we have brought in a layer where we have abstracted all the things and we can control. So when we bring in this kind of a control, right, like, so you don't have to really wait for a complete application upgrade. So application need not even go for an upgrade. Application still can continue with the same way, but in the configuration data and by libraries, what I might be consuming may have to undergo a change. So in that level, what happens is like it becomes easy for any organization to set up a migration plan and work towards that. Yeah, Prem, like,
Yeah, I am there,
uh,
yes.
yeah, okay.
uh, Now, after the key management stuff is done, how can we look at key rotation algorithms swap out be implemented without disrupting the business operation? Because when you change something, we should not affect the operations that are going on, and business should be as usual, right? So how do
Yeah.
you look at that, Ganesh?
Absolutely, Prem. Like I think in that context, I think we have to understand a little bit on something I'm going to introduce as a term as a non-human identity. So what does this non-human identity even bring in is like when we talk about identities and way we authenticate, there are multiple type of non-human identities that we use in today. So your API key is there, your secrets are there, your tokens are there. There are multiple identities that we use in our system or within our organization today. On all these identities, as we talked earlier, like it comes with some kind of a validity period or needs a rotation period and all those things. In all these things, like one of the important identity that we all have to definitely look in is like the certificate, the digital certificate. Because whenever we talk about an authentication or a higher form of security and higher form of authentication layer, digital certificates plays a very important role. So we all know, like we talk about SSL/TLS certificate or web PKI certificate, all of us are aware that there is a digital certificate attached to it, and there is an domain certificate, and we have a EV certificate, we have OV kind of a certificate. Now this certificate becomes a very important element in the overall journey. Now, when we talked about moving from a traditional crypto algorithm to a post-quantum algorithm, all these certificate also has to go through a change. It cannot be used by the same algorithm. You may have to get a new certificate based out of a post-quantum cryptography. In all these layers, like the CLM, we call it as a certificate lifecycle management, like that becomes a very important layer within a crypto agility platform. And we have to set up an automation layer around this. Like, why do we set up an automation? Because all these certificates do comes with an expiry period. Like it gets expired every 398 days. For every certificate type, there is a different expiry period. Now we need a platform where we will be able to rotate these certificate in a periodical period, in a periodicity. So the periodicity can be like every year or every month or every 2 months or every 6 months. That can be based on various organizational policies. The periodicity can be, but still we need an automation platform. The another important thing is like when we talked about earlier about the crypto agility, this is where like when we are using an RSA 2048 and I may have to move towards a post-quantum algorithm like a dilithium as an algorithm, which is based out of the post-quantum cryptographic algorithm, we need a single touch point where we can go and do all this in an automated way. So that aspect, like to put it in a very real consumable sense, like the most important thing we would require is like one is a centralized piece of visibility and management, and the second being an automation layer which can help you out in the crypto agility aspect.
Yeah. With that, how are traditional PKA systems built for this kind of cryptographic transition? Are there major work to be done, or is there that can be easily changed? Is one pointer
Yeah.
that I want to understand from you, Ganesh.
Yeah, definitely. I think absolutely. I think if you talk about all the legacy PKI or crypto systems, right, like they are definitely not ready. So that means many of these applications, many of these systems have to go through an upgrade. So we know that like already many vendors are working toward that infrastructure to support post-quantum algorithm, either to support for a hybrid certificate or like whether to become a crypto agile friendly APIs. All these things are like we have been going on. So one such example is like I think all of us know about OpenSSL. So we use OpenSSL in one form or the other form in very for many of our crypto operations. Recently, OpenSSL published with a OpenSSL 3.5 version, which comes with a complete post-quantum algorithm support. So
Hmm.
what does it mean? Like that means we are seeing a chain like all these cryptographic libraries and vendors and applications which would require this kind of an upgrade. They've already started happening, and we are going to see more such movement happening with all these PKI systems or a crypto system moving towards PQC friendly stack, right? I should say a technology stack to that level, right?
Yeah, Ganesh.
Yeah,
Okay. Now, coming to the ecosystem and the integration that we want to look at,
right. Yeah.
how are the major browsers like Chrome and others, plus
Mhm.
operating systems and the cloud platforms responding to crypto agility and the PQC?
Absolutely. I think we are seeing a trend like where most of the browsers, what we use, Chrome or Edge, right? Like they already have started supporting, providing, understanding the post quantum algorithm in terms of at least the key exchange protocol and also understanding a certificate. So, to that level, major players, we are seeing a shift that has been already there. In fact, these browsers were supporting when we had these algorithms even in a draft state. These algorithms were supported for many application providers to validate how the post quantum is being working on. And now with all these algorithm standardization happened, they also have upgraded their version to support with the standardized algorithms as per the NIST. So we are seeing that like all these browsers, and absolutely on the cloud providers also we are seeing the shift that it has been started upgrading, and they are also seeing like how we can have a model of a hybrid based model or like a post quantum based model, and we are seeing uh, many such protocols upgrading like X509 or a TLS or SSH protocols being enabled with support for post quantum support. We see that like all these major players like whatever we are using it, we see a shift toward the post quantum already there. Whether it is complete, definitely not. They are also upgrading based on how it is recommended, and these changes are coming in a very periodic basis. But we are not definitely on the start point, but we are already somewhere. We are moved out of the start point and we are moved toward the journey. That journey has already been started.
I think everything starts with a small initiative and then we get
Yeah.
into this one. What are some interoperability challenges when adopting hybrid or post quantum algorithms, Ganesh?
Absolutely. I think this is something which I even highlighted in one of our queries, right? Like earlier. That is going to be an absolute problem statement we are going to face, right? Like a compatibility. Like we are going to see a lot of incompatible systems and how they are going to have a fallback mechanism. Just assume that like I have changed my web portal to have only a post quantum based certificate. Now, many applications, not necessarily only browser, there can be so many other third-party applications which might be consuming my portal. But if they can't even understand a post-quantum algorithm certificate, that becomes an incompatible system. That is number one. The second thing is like the certificate sizes, like what we talked of. These certificate sizes itself are going to get increased. They are not like a same size like what we saw with the traditional crypto algorithm. Protocol mismatch can be there. So I might be going with a TLS 1.3 with a cipher suit with a MLKM as a exchange protocol, but that particular application which is connecting, they may not even understand the post quantum algorithm protocol. So this is going to be a major concern. So most important thing that has to get evolved, right? Like praying for this journey to be successful. I think the cross vendor coordination becomes a very important key for this journey to be more successful. And that's how the most of the governing bodies are there. Like now we have a browser bodies, we have a lot of other standard bodies or a compliance, or there are analyst report coming in for various industries. So all of them are going to play a very important role in setting up this compatibility issues, so that like these devices and applications can start interacting among themselves or interoperable among themselves without any kind of an issue.
You spoke about vendors, right?
Right.
Now, how are the vendors equipped, or
Mhm.
how are they getting evaluated? Should
Mhm.
the teams evaluate vendors' readiness for crypto agility?
Absolutely. I think the vendor should start questioning queries like they should definitely ask the vendor like, hey, do you support PQC algorithm? Can we change your cryptographic algorithm without redeployment? Or what is your how your product is built for a modular crypto? Do you offer visibility into where the crypto is used? So these kind of queries, right, like that will help them to understand vendor, and they should also definitely look into the vendor roadmap and how they are working with the standardization like misstandardization, and giving them those kind of indicators, right? Like that will help for the products, for any company to check with the vendor and then provide one some kind of an understanding.
Now, coming to next look at, are we overhyping quantum threat, or we actually behind preparing for it? So what is your take on it?
Absolutely. I think this is definitely not a hype, but it is a high impact. But at this point of time, I will call it as a low frequency event. But at the same time, like as I mentioned, the data longevity, right? Like that becomes a very important aspect before we can even ask for prioritize or understand the risk and also think about the migration complexity, right? This is where we should be able to understand, and we have to be not considering this a hype anymore, Prem. We should consider that this is something which is real and which is something which you should be looking out immediately.
With that, now I want to understand, with you being part of AVX, how do we look at this kind of a quantum leap problem that is going on, quantum agility and crypto? How is that you as an organization or the main part of browser integrations and challenges that we are looking at can enable industry or the organizations?
Right. Sure, Pram. I think from AppUX standpoint, like, so we as a platform being a certificate lifecycle management and automation platform, right? Like, we already solve a crypto agility issue as part of this platform already. So when we say we already solved that, like, it is like we understand the complete ecosystem. We understand any integration that is as part of any organization. We try to bring in the visibility around the certificate and what kind of a algorithm, what kind of a path they are using, and all these things accordingly. And we provide a visibility aspect, and we also help the organization to move towards an automation platform where they can go and set up something like, I have to set up an auto regeneration or auto renewal functionality. And this also helps the organization to choose a multiple certificates and then do a single click switching from one algorithm to other algorithm, right? Like, this is a kind of a thing which we already provide. On top of this, right, like, since this the particular topic what we are discussing, right, like, Prem, on in terms of post quantum, right, like, and the crypto journey and the quantum computing, we also talked, I think the first touch point, like, when we started this conversation, is like the visibility aspect. Today we don't have a visibility about the cryptographic assets within any organization. So we
Right.
do also have an extended platform module, right, like, where it can provide you and visibility into all your cryptographic assets, not necessarily a certificate. Beyond that, also, it can understand at the code layer, or it can understand at the configuration layer, or it can understand at the dependency layer. It provides you all that visibility into those level of cryptographic assets, inventorize that, bring in a visibility, and it also provides a kind of a recommendation or a remediation by understanding what kind of application, what kind of a version you're using. If you're using an Apache, like, what is the version you're using? Is that even currently can support post quantum, or whether you have to upgrade to a higher version? So these kind of journey is being built into that platform. So talking from the standpoint of a quantum computing and the crypto agility, right, Prem, to conclude, like, AppUX absolutely provides you both these into the platform. So it can understand a quantum, it can understand like visible areas, it can cover up all the blind spot and bring in all the assets. Then it can work for a solution to give you a remediation. And the third thing is like it can also set its platform for automation. So it can be an end-to-end automation, or it can be a self-serviceable automation. But that helps to really help you out in moving towards the post-quantum journey.
I think we have covered a lot of ground here, and what I've done is I've taken the website details of Ganesh's firm, HappyVex, and I've scrolled it here. You want to know more about crypto agility and navigation on quantum stuff? That is going to be one thing that we should look at the link. I am reposting this link again, and you can have that looked at while you are. Uh, want to more know more about crypto and stuff, right? So I am reposting the link. Give me a second. Yeah. So I've updated the link. What Ganesh has informed me, or the team has informed me on that. So I'm scrolling it on the screen there. Now, with the last question that I would like to ask, and what does truly crypto agile future look like, and what stake if we don't get in there in time? So that's the point that I want to understand from you, Ganesh. With that would be the last pointer that I want to. Then I would like to summarize on what we have discussed so far.
Absolutely, Prem. I think it's a good summary question also, right? Like, to
Yeah.
on this particular topic, right? Like, crypto agile, actually, as I mentioned earlier, it is definitely, it means a seamless algorithm switching. But this also requires a lot more real-time threat detection, and it also need to build a resilient system that don't rely on fixed crypto assumptions. Like we should not have any assumptions built around any platform. So without this, what is going to be a problem is like it's definitely organizations are going to have some kind of a breaches, some kind of an outages, some kind of a regulatory penalties, and that can also be an reputational harm once these quantum threats materialize and that becomes real. So my summary point on this particular point is like, yes, we definitely require a crypto agile platform and an automation platform which can help organization to move toward the post quantum journey as and when these quantum threats materialize and quantum computing and the breaking of traditional crypto classical crypto algorithms becomes real.
Ganesh, thank you. With that, I would like to take a small pointer on some of the pointers that I have meant. Would like to summarize with what we discussed overall on the crypto agility, navigating quantum shifts in cybersecurity. First, we started with the foundational understanding and what is crypto agility, what really does it mean, and how it is top priority in the cyberspace, cybersecurity space. Then we spoke about traditional versus crypto agility on life cycle management. Then we spoke some of the real time examples. We spoke about emerging challenges on today's cryptographic standards and what is key algorithms on cryptography that are to be considered vulnerable. That is what we started with the foundations. Then we went into the strategic point of thinking and what pointers where organizations should begin as a roadmap. We covered a lot of ground in a step by step process there. We spoke about the roadmap, we spoke about the performance, we spoke about the costs, we spoke about business agility. Then we looked at policy frameworks, compliance mandates. Then we spoke about what teams should look at from a product standpoint and the architectural changes that will come in light of quantum risks that are there. Then we have spoken about what would be the timeline that is realistically looking for quantum threats to become practical, because that's the step that we will look at going forward with quantum being going as an emerging technology that is coming here. Now coming to the next point where we spoke about technical deep dive, we spoke about post quantum cryptography, which is also called PQC, and looking at the algorithms, what are the key algorithms that look promising in this field, and ensuring also looked at integration, some of the integrations where we spoke about certificate management, we spoke about architectural patterns, and we spoke about algorithm swipe out, key rotation, and stuff. What we also spoke about is how difficult is it to transition from traditional PKI systems to the uh, kind of cryptographic keys that we are looking at. Then we spoke about integrations between browsers, operating systems, cloud platforms with agility and PQC coming into picture. Interoperable challenges we spoke about on post quantum algorithms, and then we spoke about forensic and risk, where how threats are being managed and true crypto agility looks for the future. That's what we spoke about. And that was a final state point where Ganesh mentioned how things are shaping up truly with the agility coming to the future, like what would be the stake and where we should look at this time is what we spoke about. And these are the pointers that we spoke on the hour long session that we had with Ganesh being part of the session today. Thank you, Ganesh. Any pointers that you want to highlight before we close the session, Ganesh?
Absolutely, I think to understand from all our perspective, I think the quantum computing and crypto agility is definitely one of the important problem statements, and that is going to become more and more prominent in the coming days as we near those deadlines and compliances. So, in that aspect, I think this is a very great topic that we could cover, and it's definitely, I think, from the AppUX standpoint, we are in the right platform, and we provide you the kind of a solution like what we require in terms of assessment and the crypto agility. Thank you, Prem.
Thank you, Ganesh. With this, I think we have come to the fag end of the session. Please do follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, which is streamed. This session is streamed to all these platforms. Hope we found this discussion valuable for you, and thank you for joining us. And our next podcast is scheduled for tomorrow, which is our 239th episode, where we will be talking about interventions, why capability matters, and that is more important pointer where interventions are needed to build capabilities at 6:30 p.m. IST. Looking forward to see you again there. And thank you, Ganesh. Thank you for being here. This I would like to conclude the session. Thank you.